last week we did Baruch Atah Hashem, Elokeinu v'Elokei Avosenu. Blessed are you, Hashem, our God and the God of our fathers. That was a very involved topic, and we're not going to repeat it now. Please refer to the video class for that. Okay, then we're moving on now to Elokei Abraham. Elokei Abraham means what? God of Abraham. Elokei Yitzchak. God of Yitzchak. Elokei Yaakov. And God of Yaakov. So last week we spoke about, I said I wasn't going to go back to last week, but just to put these words in context. Last week we spoke about the subject of that most brachas begin with, most blessings begin with Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam. Blessed are you, Hashem, our God, melech haolam, King of the world. And so much so that the Gemara says, and Shulchan Aruch says, that a bracha must begin with these words, including melech haolam, in order to be valid. And if it doesn't begin with those words, it's an invalid bracha. And yet we were puzzled to find that the blessing that begins Esrei, the most important set of brachas that we say during the day at any time, doesn't begin with these words, and it seems to be a problem because it should be invalid. So we concluded by saying that the phrase Elokei Avosenu, God of our fathers, is the equivalent of saying Melech HaOlam, King of the world, because the gentleman who was sitting here, Yitzchak, who was sitting here, said, because it is through the fathers, Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and the relationship that they established with Hashem, that we get the concept of Hashem as our king. Not to say that there weren't kings prior to that, but we made a point, and Lisa last week pointed this out, that there are two types of kings. There's the tyrannical sort of king who rules over his subjects for his own fit, and then there's the kindly, loving king who takes care of his subjects. So the story last week about Joe, the Nigerian from the book Escape from India, who used to play chess in the Indian prison, and when the protagonist plays chess with him, and Joe asks him, what is the purpose of the game of chess? And he answers him, he says, the purpose is to protect the king. And Joe, the big Nigerian in the Indian prison, says, no, you've got it all wrong. The purpose of the king is to protect his subjects, right? And we told the story of Onkelos, who was being kidnapped by, Onkelos was a Roman who had converted to Judaism, and when the Romans were trying to kidnap him back, the way that he thwarted them essentially was by kissing the mezuzah, and they asked him what it, and he said, your king sits on the inside and makes you stand on the outside and guard him. We sit on the inside, and that mezuzah is a sign that our king is standing outside guarding us. Which king would you rather serve, right? And then the soldiers who were trying to abduct him ended up converting to Judaism as well. So that Melech, the Melech who is the one who cares for his subjects, he's the protector and the sustainer of his subjects, the benevolent king. That's the king that image of the king comes to us from Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Not that there wasn't a king before that, but when we say Melech HaOlam, we have to know which Melech HaOlam we're talking about. We're talking about the Melech HaOlam who is Elokei Avosenu, the God of our fathers. So these two phrases are synonymous. That was how we ended off last class.
Can I just ask a clarification?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I wasn't here. That when we think of Melech HaOlam, we should think about the relationship that our avot had with Hashem?
Well, yes and no, meaning not exactly. Really, here in Shemoneh Esreh, when we replace the phrase Melech HaOlam, King of the world, King of the universe, with Elokei Avosenu, the God of our fathers, and the question is why? So it's to understand this, to give us the background that the God of that was identified by Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. That's what we mean when we say Melech HaOlam. So it's through the relationship with that Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov forged with Hashem that we gain our picture of what Melech HaOlam is, but we don't have to necessarily, when we say Melech HaOlam every time, think about Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. No, but when we say king, what king are we talking about? Are we talking about the despotic, dictatorial type of a king, or are we talking about the benevolent, loving caretaker? So yes, we're talking caretaker. How do I know? Because that phrase is replaced in Shemoneh Esreh with Elokei Avoseinu, God of our fathers. So who is the God of our fathers? So we're going to say, well, how do I know that? Why maybe God of our fathers doesn't mean that. So here the point being of Elokei Avoseinu, that this is a God who has a relationship with us. He's a God who has a relationship with us. And the truth is that this paragraph of Shemoneh Esreh is called Avos, it's called fathers, and it's like the relationship of a father and a son. Meaning even the Avos establish a relationship with God as like Avinu Malkeinu. He's our father, our king. We're like the prince, if you will. We're the beloved progeny of the king. So he's still our ruler and he's still our king, but he's also our father. He's a loving king. He's a loving king. He's a caring king. He's a nurturing king. So that is.
I guess that's how when we think about Hashem, we have those biblical stories. That's what we have.
Yeah.
What we have,
right? So that's why the Shemoneh Esreh harkens back to Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov when it, instead of saying Melech, is the Melech HaOlam. He's the king that has this loving relationship with us. So I'm not saying that whenever you say Melech HaOlam, which isn't in here, but it is in the other brachos, you should think of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, but you should think of loving king. How do I know? Because Elokei Avoseinu, he's the God of our fathers. And that's sort of what we get from the Shemoneh Esreh. Now, what we started out with today was Elokei Avraham, Elokei Yitzchak, Elokei Yaakov, the God of Avraham, the God of Yitzchak, and the God of Yaakov. Why? Speaking of Yitzchak, here he is. Why do I mention all three?
Why do we have to put pages before each one? Why do we say
Great question.
And then have all three?
Beautiful question. So, just for the recording, in case the mic didn't pick you up, Fred Barber asks, why does it say God of Abraham and then it repeats God for Yitzchak and again God of Yaakov instead of God of Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov? Why repeat the God 3 times? Three different gods? Obviously not.
Yeah. They all represent different attributes that our foundation is built on.
Different attributes. Okay, good. I like what you're saying. So say more. Say better. Say deeper. They represent different attributes. Why are these different attributes associated with 3 different individuals?
Different times.
Okay. Certainly chronologically, Abraham and then Yitzchak and then Yaakov.
Also relates to each individual.
Aha. Very good. So this is how I learned it as well. The point that every individual has a unique connection to Hashem that's not the same as someone else's connection. So certainly, really, your question really answers the first question. In other words, why mention Abraham and Yitzchak and Yaakov? So the answer is, well, notice that it says God for each one, meaning it's not that every single person relates to God or connects to God in the exact same way, or has to relate to God and connect to God in the exact same way, because everybody's different. So if I tell you there's only one path that you can march, and that's just sort of not within your capability, so then are you lost? Like, forget about it. It's over. I have no way of reaching this God because I can't do it the way Rafi Mollot does it. I can't do it the way Karen Weinstein does it. I can't do it the way Andrew Levin does it. So I'm out. So yeah.
I think of it as like a spiritual thumbprint. You know how we all have our own thumbprints. I believe that spiritually we're all unique in that way. That's what this I need to be able to relate to my God in a way that I'm spiritually able to grasp it.
Yes.
In the grooves of who I am.
Yes, that's right. Everyone is a unique individual and has a unique connection and needs to find that connection and nurture that connection and serve Hashem in the way that is their soul's way to do it. So I want to just share with you a beautiful Gemara that Gemara. So it's a Gemara in Makos that says like this. It's a famous Gemara. I think everybody knows it because we usually say it. It's actually funny because whenever we learn something like between Mincha and Ma'ariv, so right afterwards, the rabbi says something really fast, and then we say Kaddish. Right? Well, what are we saying over there? So it's not even in Parkei Avos. It's the classic saying adage from the sages that is used to close a chapter of Pirkei Avos, but it's not actually from Pirkei Avos. As far as I know, it's from a Gemara in Makos. It says, so Rabbi Chanani Akashya Omer, Rabbi Chanani, the son of Akashya, says, Ratza HaKadosh Baruch Hu lezakos es Yisrael. Hashem wanted to lezakos es Yisrael. Hashem wanted to give Yisrael zechuyos, which we usually translate as merits, right? He wanted to give Israel merits. Go with that for now. Lefichach, therefore, how did he give merits? Hirba lahem Torah mitzvos. Therefore, he increased for them hirba from the word harbe, meaning many. He made a lot, abundant Torah mitzvos. He made a big Torah with a lot of mitzvahs in order to give us more merits. So that's, it may seem like an obvious statement. But a lot of people, unfortunately, very sadly, don't see it that way. You say, why are there so many commandments? Oh, because, I don't know, God needs all the flattery in the world. Or they're just there to make my life difficult. Or to test me. Or to burden me. Or I feel they're a burden. Or whatever it is. Unfortunately, many people have a very negative view towards, oh, there's so many laws, and there's so many details, and there's so many things. Oh my gosh, it's so... But, says Rabbi Chanani ben Akashya, this wasn't done to torture you. This wasn't done to put stumbling blocks in front of you, to make it more difficult for you to succeed because there's so many rules, and to get you into trouble because now there's just more rules that you could fail at. No, just the opposite. It was done l'zakos es Yisrael, which means it was done to give us more opportunities to elevate ourselves. But that's on one level, meaning there's so many different ways I could connect to Hashem. So on the one level, it relates to what I said to you just a minute ago, that, well, let's say that, tzedakah is not my thing, or whatever. Maybe I don't have the means. But he didn't make that the only mitzvah, right? There's also Shabbos. Shabbos is where I really come alive. That's where I really can imagine. Hashem just gave us one commandment, tzedakah. And what if I didn't have the means, or it's really difficult for me to give, and I didn't have any other access point? Or the other way, if it was just Shabbos, and I found Shabbos to be such a dreary day, and God forbid, I don't, but I hope no one does, and unfortunately, I know that there are many people that aren't so positive about Shabbos, but say Shabbos was a real struggle for me, and I really didn't connect to Hashem with Shabbos. So, but at the very least, but there's kosher, I like kosher. That's good. I like doing kosher, going to the Trader Joe's and finding all the cool kosher symbols and collect the whole set, I'm into kosher. So what if I had just had Shabbos and I didn't have kosher? What if I just had kosher and I didn't have Shabbos? Not everybody, some people are really excellent in certain areas and weak in other areas, and vice versa. So what if we just had a few opportunities? A lot of us would be left out in the cold. We'd be left out in the rain. But Hashem gives us so many opportunities to find a way to connect to Him. Oh, okay, that didn't work for you? How about try this? I'm a teacher, right? So I have lots of students, not so many. Truth is, we have a small school. I have, like 10 students in a class. But still, it's me against 10. The odds are not in my favor, right? So I want to teach something. I can give a lesson, and maybe half the class doesn't understand it. So then I have to find for that half a class another way of teaching it to them. So I need to have 2 teaching strategies. And maybe that second strategy only works for 3 out of 5. So I need to have a third teaching strategy that's going to reach the last 2, or a fourth or a fifth, or however many I need. But the more ways of connecting I have, the better chances the students in my class have to succeed. So Hashem sort of is like the ultimate different instructor, that he's given us so many pathways to connect to him. And that's the way we need to look at the mitzvahs. There's so many opportunities. Okay, like, let's not get down on ourselves. Maybe I have a hard time with this, but there's 613 options. Now, granted, nowadays, many of them don't apply. We don't have a Beis HaMikdash. We don't have many of the laws that are related to the land of Israel. The truth is, there's only about 100-something that apply nowadays, but those are pretty good odds, right? So the Rambam even goes so far as to say that in his Perush HaMishnayos, in his commentary on the Mishnah, that essentially, the meaning of this statement of the sages is that maybe some of us only one time in our life will ever get a mitzvah right, but that's going to be our ticket, so to speak, to Olam Haba. That's going to be our ticket in, because there's a story in the Gemara about even a great sage who, I don't want to go with the whole story, it's a great story, but he was very repentant that he felt he had done something wrong, and he said to his fellow sage, is there any hope for me? And that sage said to him, have you ever done one mitzvah properly in your whole life? And then he went on to talk about a certain incident with some tzedakah money, and he mixed it up with some other monies, and he was very tempted to, kind of maybe use the money in an improper way because he was going to justify that his non-tzedakah money was mixed in with the tzedakah money, and maybe, but there was also a possibility that he was going to be using the money that had been set aside for tzedakah. So even though it was a large sum of money and some of the tzedakah had gotten mixed in, he gave the whole thing to tzedakah. So he relates over to the other sage, well, I did once do this thing. So he said, okay, so now you can rest assured that you have a portion in the world to come. Meaning, sometimes it's just going to be one thing we do in our entire lives that's gonna do it for us. It's gonna get us in. So why am I saying that? Yeah. So therefore, let's go back. So God of Abraham, God of Yitzchak, God of Yaakov. There's so many different individuals, and there isn't one way. There isn't, so to speak, there is one God, but it isn't one God. There's only one. I was the God of Abraham the way he approached me, and I was the God of Yitzchak the way he approached me, and I was the God of Yaakov the way he approached me, and I'm going to be the God of Gloria the way she approaches me, and the God of Fred the way he approaches me, and I'm going to be the God of Sandy the way she approaches me. So everyone has an angle of approach. Everyone has an angle of approach. So our relationships with Hashem are individualized, and therefore a person should never feel, I just don't have a way. Just don't have a way of connecting with Hashem. You have a way. Find a way. There's many ways. Hashem is waiting to hear from you. Okay. Fine. Moving on.
Can I say something before you?
Please. Please.
So I just from a different angle, because when I guess I think and I read it, it's like each of those were started from a different place. Abraham had this shit where he got to, and then there was Yitzchak, and then there was Yaakov, who started from another established level of something else. But I think as we grow individually too, as time goes, we sort of are at one point with something, and then we grow, we get into another point, and then we get into another point.
Right.
And I think that it's important that in all the points that we are, you're right, God is there for us through all of it, and we relate to all, even though we do change. Life changes us, and we get, when we get more mature, some of us do, some of us don't, but and we learn, we grow, we come up. So I guess I look at it more as an individual basis rather than
Okay, I think what you're saying is very valid, and I think that that it's a beautiful point. I really do. In other words, yeah, it's not just each person has one way, but each person has many ways. Time now I approach Hashem this way, but later I can approach Hashem in a different way as I change. It reminds me of um, the Pesach Seder. So we start with Kadesh and then Urchatz. And it's interesting that those two are paired together. I think, if I'm not mistaken, those are only two where there's a vav in between them. Kadesh Urchatz. Rechatz means wash. But Urchatz means and wash. Kadesh, sanctify, make Kiddush. Urchatz, and wash. But the other things are just on their own. Karpas, Yachatz, break the middle matzah. Magid, tell the story. Rachta, wash again. But why is it Urchatz? I'm not sure if I'm going to answer that question right now, but it's interesting to know. But here's the point I want to make, is that my Rabbi, and when I was in yeshiva, Rav Dalla, he said an interesting idea that it seems like Kadesh Urchatz, you could say, is out of order. Not just because the yakas wash first before Kiddush. By the way, at the Seder, did the yakas wash before Kiddush? So it's really Rechatz V'Kadesh.
I don't really remember.
Because it's funny. I mean, because we do Kadesh Urchatz, but the Germans they wash first. But he said, my Rebbe said more on the level of a homily. He said, normally before you can sanctify something, you have to cleanse yourself. Before you can come into sanctity, there's removing that which is unclean. So, for example, the pasuk says, the verse in Tehillim says, "Sur meira va'aseh tov." Go away from bad, do good. So first remove the bad, and then you can do the good. But the pairing of Kadesh Urchatz together is, my Rebbe used to say, sometimes you're not ready yet for the Urchatz. Sometimes you're not ready to let go of some of the negative aspects of your life, things that you're doing that maybe you ought not to do, elements of personality that you're not ready to conquer just yet. So should that be a barrier? Should that be a door? I say, I can never get better because I have these flaws. I still do these kinds of things that I ought not to do. How can I approach God? Mm-hmm. So if I can't sur meira, if I can't go away from the evil, then I can't do aseh tov. I can't go and do good. And we let the bad become a barrier. So we said, Kadesh Urchatz. You know what? Sometimes Kadesh first, some the washing for later. But you can sometimes come dirty, so to speak. And Kadesh, just taste the sanctity first, and then Urchatz. So it's a nice point, not directly related, but in terms of like, you're saying a person grows in stages, and at a certain stage he'll relate to Hashem one way, and another stage he'll relate to Hashem another way. You can say, I'm not ready for this yet. I'm not ready to take this on, but that's not going to be a barrier for me to say that I can't do anything at all. So I can start over here, which is where I began with. Everyone has an access point, but you're saying, but you don't have to stay at that access point. You could just find the back door, the side door, the way into a relationship with Hashem. But later, you can use it to move into another room in the house. So I like what you said. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, so that's the individualized God, God of Abraham, God of Isaac, God of Jacob. Next word, Hakel, the God. Everyone with me? On the second line on page 98, the second line of the first bracha that starts with Baruch, towards the end of the line, the last word, Hadol. So Hakel Hagadol, the God who is big. He's big. What do you mean great? Okay, great. The God who is great. He's great. Okay. Hagibor means mighty, strong. The Hanora. And what's Nora? Anyone? I don't hear. Awesome. Yeah. No, and awesome. God who is Great, mighty, and awesome. Okay. And it's pretty straightforward words. Any questions on these words?
Hakel.
Yeah, it's ha'el, but generally the custom is when not in prayer or reading from the Torah text, we sort of disguise the names of God by mispronouncing them.
Okay.
So if that's confusing, I'm sorry.
Okay. I was confused by the very same thing.
Okay.
You know what? Pardon me for not clarifying that. When I say the names of God, this being among them, the Aleph Lamed, I'm going to mispronounce them on purpose in the traditional mispronunciation way, which is done when speaking out of the context of prayer itself or reading of the Torah text. So, like we'll say Elokeinu as opposed to Heinu, right? We take one syllable and kind of blur it a little bit because we don't want to take God's name in vain.
It's like saying Hashem.
Similar to saying Hashem. Sometimes people say for Yud Kei Vav Kei, and again Yud Kei Vav Kei, it's not a K, it's the letter Hey, but we don't even spell it out to that degree. So we even say K instead of Hey. Some people say Havaya, rearrange the letters. I say, you never ever hear anyone say that? It's called the Shem Havaya, the name of Havaya. Now, Havaya is a Hebrew word, which means like existence. Havaya, which we spoke about, I think, last week. It's on the recording. I remember because I listened to the recording. That the name, that first name, the third letter in the third word in the paragraph, that name, which is the Yud and the Hey and the Vav and the Hey, is 3 words. Haya was, Hoveh is, will be. Haya Hoveh Yihya will be. And so it's sort of a state of being verb. Is, was, will be, past, present, future. We said last week is the name that brings creation into existence. But refer to last week's recording for more on that. So it's a nickname. Sometimes it's to rearrange the letters and say the word Havaya, which is from the same root and means existence or being. Shem Havaya. So we always disguise the names when we say them out of the context of prayer. So forgive me for doing that. Okay. So God who is great, mighty, awesome. Any questions on that? Okay. So I would be remiss if I didn't say something about this because you're not worried about it, so I won't trouble you. Oh, by the way, we're going to end the class early this week because Mincha has been moved to 8:45, which means that we'll have to finish by then, so we have about that long. The Gemara makes a big deal out of this because basically the question is, how can you describe God with adjectives? How can you describe God with adjectives? Because, as we spoke about before, God is infinite. So how can any adjective describe him accurately? In fact, if anything, what an adjective does is to diminish him, to say he is this. Right? We could describe his actions, which we're going to see coming up. That we're going to see that he's gomel chasadim tovim. He bestows good kindnesses. We can talk about his actions, but to apply an adjective directly to him is very troubling. And the Gemara is very troubled by this. And the Gemara says the only reason we can do it is because Moshe Rabbeinu did it. And they quote a verse in the Torah where Moshe refers to God as Hakel, Hagadol, Hagibor, Vahanora. God who is great and mighty and awesome. These words are lifted right out of the Chumash. And the rabbis basically say, if Moshe could do it, we could do it. But only because Moshe did it. And if Moshe didn't do it, we wouldn't dare. We wouldn't dare. Okay, so now that said, any questions? Okay, I have more to say on this, but I'm not going to belabor the point. What does it mean that God is great? What does it mean that he's great? I really want to talk about this, so you'll forgive me if I do, because this really refers back to something that Lisa said last week. Last week in the class, we're talking about the infinity of God and how he comes into the fine world. So, and that we have to be godlike by being givers because God is a giver, and that, so because God is a giver and he's a giver by virtue of his infinity. So Lisa said what she's hearing from that is that a person is not diminished through giving. The giving does not deplete the does not deplete the giver. So, and I said, as a matter of fact, and what I added to that is that the Gemara says just the opposite. When a person, the Torah says, when a person gives, he receives in return even more. Like aser to aser, it says to give ma'aser, to give a tenth, but it says it twice. Aser to aser, give a tithe, give a tithe. So why does it say it twice? And the Gemara says, in order that you should, that the double occurrence is to understand that there's a hidden meaning, and that is aser, give a tenth, a tithe. The second word can be read because it's the same spelling as ashir, like be rich. Aser, so the Gemara expands it, says aser, give a tenth, bishvil shetes ashir, in order that you should become wealthy. That a person who gives actually in return becomes greater, expand more, has more than they began with. So here when we say, we're going to say Gadol Gibor Nora, that's 3 adjectives. Now, is it a coincidence that it's 3 adjectives? And we just said Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov? I don't think so. I think that these 3 adjectives correspond to the 3 fathers. And Avraham was noted for his giving and kindness, his kindness. As a matter of fact, Kabbalistically, one of the, they talk about the divine emanations, and I don't want to go too much into this, but the divine emanation, there's 10 divine emanations, there's 3 above and 7 below, and the 7 below correspond to 7 individuals in Jewish history: Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Moshe, Aharon, David, and Yosef and David, right? And those are the 7 guests on Sukkot. Okay, so the of those 7 divine attributes, the first one is chesed. The first one is the attributes, emanations. I'm not going to go into what is the spheros in Hebrew. Chesed is the first one, kindness. Avraham is the guest. He's the ushpizin. He's the guest that corresponds to chesed, aptly, right? So then you have, so it goes chesed, and then some go gevura. Hey, what do you know? Gibor is the next word over here. Gevura, strength. And then there's something called tiferes, which means glory, beauty. We say in Vayvarach David every morning, it's in the Psukei de Zimra, the paragraphs of Tehillim that are the prelude to much of the davening, a paragraph called Vayvarach David. It's actually not from Tehillim, it's really from Divrei Hayamim. But in that is some very famous words that we also say when we take out the Torah. And we take out the Torah. Lecha Hashem ha-gedula v'ha-gevura v'ha-tiferes. Wait a second. Gedula, gevura, tiferes. Gadol, gibor, and then tiferes. But we said in the divine emanations, it's chesed, gevura, tiferes, which means that chesed and gedula, kindness and greatness, are synonymous. Also, here it's Gadol, Gibor, Nora. So we have the same progression, Gedula, Gevura, but the third one is Nora, which is the replacement for Tiferes. So you see that Tiferes, glory, splendor, and Nora, awesome, these are also synonyms, okay? So Gadol, what I love about this is that it came to me only after the last class, because of what Lisa said, that Gadol is the description we're giving to Hashem that corresponds to Avraham, corresponds to that relationship. And it's called Gadol because Avraham is the attribute of giving, is the attribute of kindness, the attribute of chesed. And it's telling us exactly what you said, that giving, chesed, does not diminish the giver. It actually makes him greater. Gedula, greatness or bigness, as Yitzchak said, Gadol means big or great. We're not talking big in size. We're talking greatness. But so to speak, like just like God's capacity is not diminished by giving, but so to speak, we say that the giver is increased because we said a giver becomes more godlike. He becomes closer to the infinite. So Gadol, this is a description of God. Gadol is the attribute of kindness. Gibor is the attribute of might, gevura, which is synonymous with Anyone know what it's synonymous with? Gevura? Din. Who said din? Lisa? Din means what? Judgment.
Law.
Laws.
I feel like
Strictness.
I tell you how I do it because recently doing this. I call it exactitude.
Exactitude.
It's very difficult to go with those other words.
Okay. I accept
I
that.
like to feel like we're in a close relationship, how God loves